Most people misunderstand intelligence, not because they lack it, but because they were trained to recognize the wrong signals. They think intelligence is speed, quick replies, sharp comebacks, being the first person in the room to speak. They think intelligence is information. Books read, facts memorized, concepts explained. But none of that is intelligence, not in the way it actually functions in the real world. Because intelligence doesn't reveal itself when things are calm. It reveals itself when pressure enters the room. The moment you are challenged. The moment you are ignored. The moment someone disrespects you and waits to see what you'll do next. That moment is where intelligence ranks itself. And most people fail it without realizing they were being tested. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The louder someone proves how intelligent they are, the lower they usually rank. Not always, but often enough to be predictable. Real intelligence doesn't rush to be seen. It doesn't defend its reputation. It doesn't explain itself to feel safe. It waits. Because explanation is not power. Control is. And control only becomes visible when you feel the urge to react. But don't. This is why so many people believe they are intelligent, yet remain easy to manipulate, easy to provoke, easy to steer. They mistake awareness for authority, knowledge for dominance, thoughts for outcomes. But intelligence is not what you know. It's what you can withhold. The pause you don't fill. The emotion you don't display. The move you delay when everyone expects you to act. That restraint, that's where ranking begins. And here's what most people never notice. Intelligence is not evenly distributed. It's layered. There are levels to it. Not moral levels, not educational levels, behavioral levels. Each level reveals itself under pressure. Not in theory, not in conversation, not in planning. Under exposure, under disrespect, under loss of control. Some people collapse at the first sign of friction. Some perform well until their ego is touched. Some appear calm until they're ignored. Very few remain unchanged. That's why intelligence can't be self-declared. It's demonstrated when no one is asking for proof. This video is not here to flatter you. It won't confirm what you already believe about yourself. If anything, it will quietly challenge it. Because if you are intelligent, truly intelligent, you won't need reassurance by the end. And if you're not, this will make you uncomfortable in ways you won't be able to explain. Before we go further, understand this clearly. This is not a test. There are no questions. There is no scorecard. Your reactions are the ranking, the irritation, the agreement, the resistance, the silence. All of it reveals where you stand. And the framework you're about to hear is not motivational. It's observational. It comes from watching how people behave when outcomes matter more than appearances. A way of seeing power that traces back to Niccolo Machiavelli, not as a philosopher of morality, but as a student of human behavior under consequence. Now, a quick thing before we continue. If you're the kind of person who wants comfort, validation, or encouragement, this isn't for you. But if you want to understand how intelligence actually functions in social hierarchies, power dynamics, and moments of pressure, then stay. Not because this will elevate you instantly, but because it will show you where elevation actually begins. So don't listen to this trying to place yourself at the top. Listen to it noticing where you feel exposed. Because intelligence doesn't announce its level. It waits for the moment you reveal it yourself. And that moment has already started. Most people assume intelligence is something you have, as if it's stored somewhere, as if it accumulates, as if once you reach a certain level, it stays there. That assumption alone places them near the bottom. Because intelligence is not a possession. It's a response pattern. It's how you behave when the environment stops being friendly, when certainty disappears, when attention is withdrawn, when pressure replaces permission. That's why two people with the same knowledge can rank completely differently. One speaks under stress, the other waits. One explains, the other observes. One reacts to reclaim control. The other lets the situation reveal itself. And here's the critical shift most people never make. Intelligence is not measured by how much you process. It's measured by how much you don't leak. Emotion leaks intelligence. Ego leaks intelligence. Urgency leaks intelligence. Every unnecessary word under pressure is a signal. Every visible frustration is a broadcast. Every rushed decision is a declaration of rank. This is why intelligence must be understood behaviorally, not intellectually. You don't discover someone's intelligence in conversation. You discover it when something doesn't go their way, when they are ignored, when they are underestimated, when their authority is questioned without explanation. That's when intelligence reveals its level, not in brilliance, in restraint. This is also why intelligence is layered, not because people are born into levels, but because most people never move beyond the first few. They confuse awareness with control. They confuse strategy with dominance. They confuse understanding human nature with being immune to it. They are not. They are simply more articulate versions of the same patterns. So before the levels themselves are revealed, the frame must be reset completely. Intelligence is not thinking faster. It is slowing the situation down. It is not seeing more options. It is choosing fewer and choosing later. It is not predicting every outcome. It is positioning yourself so outcomes matter less. This is where the hierarchy begins. At the lowest levels, intelligence is reactive. It exists only after something happens. Someone speaks. You respond. Someone disrespects. You defend. Someone challenges. You explain. Action follows stimulus immediately, without delay, without compression, without control. This feels powerful to the person experiencing it, but from the outside, it's transparent, predictable. At higher levels, intelligence creates distance, not physical distance, psychological distance. The space between stimulus and response widens. Inside that space, power accumulates. Because every second you don't react, the other person reveals more than they intended. Their motive, their insecurity, their impatience. And patience is not passive here. It's strategic. This is where most people misunderstand restraint. They think silence means weakness. They think delay means fear. They think non-response means submission. That belief alone keeps them locked in lower ranks, because true intelligence understands something uncomfortable. You don't control situations by acting inside them. You control them by controlling your exposure to them. The moment you feel the need to clarify yourself, your rank is already visible. The moment you feel misunderstood and rush to correct it, your position is announced. Not because clarification is wrong, but because timing is everything. And lower levels never control timing. They act when emotion peaks. They speak when pressure rises. They move when watched. Higher levels act when others hesitate. This is why intelligence cannot be taught like information. You can explain it. You can describe it. You can even admire it. But until someone learns to sit inside discomfort without collapsing into action, they never move up. And that's the brutal truth. Most people don't lack intelligence. They lack tolerance. Tolerance for uncertainty. Tolerance for silence. Tolerance for not being validated. They want to be seen now, heard now, understood now, and impatience always reveals rank. This is also why intelligence degrades under stress. People don't rise to their highest level. they fall to the one they've rehearsed the most. If someone practices restraint daily, they hold it under pressure. If someone practices expression, defense, explanation, they default to it. That's why intelligence must be observed across levels, not moments. One calm reaction doesn't mean high rank. One sharp insight doesn't mean elevation. Consistency under pressure does. And as the levels unfold, one thing will become increasingly clear. Lower levels seek control by doing more. Higher levels gain control by needing less. Less validation, less reaction, less visibility. The hierarchy you're about to move through is not about superiority. It's about invisibility under pressure. The higher the level, the less obvious the intelligence becomes. Because at the top, intelligence doesn't perform. It waits. And now that the frame is set, now that intelligence is no longer confused with knowledge or speed or expression, the structure itself can be revealed. Because there are levels. And most people never realize which one they live in until they see their own behavior reflected back at them. So the mistake would be to assume that intelligence rises naturally. It doesn't. It fractures. It separates into layers based on one variable most people never train: response under pressure. This is why intelligence forms a hierarchy instead of a spectrum. Not because people are born different, but because pressure exposes habits, and habits decide rank. Here's the first rule of the hierarchy. No one permanently lives at a level. People visit levels. They default to one. Under comfort, many appear elevated. Under stress, almost everyone descends. That descent is automatic, because intelligence is not who you are when things are going well. It's who you become when control is threatened. This is where the hierarchy becomes uncomfortable, because it doesn't categorize people by talent or education. It categorizes them by behavioral collapse points. Each level is defined by where someone loses restraint, where emotion overrides strategy, where ego overrides timing, where reaction replaces positioning. And once you see this clearly, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing it everywhere. In conversations, in arguments, in leadership, in silence, especially in silence. Because silence is where most people reveal their rank without speaking. The hierarchy is not about being smart. It's about what breaks you. At the lowest levels, people break immediately. They react to tone. They react to disrespect. They react to implication. Their intelligence exists only after provocation. They don't initiate control. They respond to loss of it. These people feel alive in conflict, because conflict gives them permission to act. They confuse motion with power. At the next levels, people hold slightly longer. They wait. They calculate. But they still need resolution. They need clarity. They need to be understood. They need the situation to settle so they can feel stable again. Their intelligence depends on closure, which means uncertainty still controls them. As you move higher, something shifts. The need for resolution weakens. People begin to tolerate ambiguity without filling it. They don't need to win immediately. They don't need to correct narratives. They don't need to restore balance. They let imbalance exist, because imbalance reveals leverage. And this is the line most people never cross, because it feels unnatural. The human instinct is to stabilize, to explain, to defend, to restore harmony. But intelligence at higher levels does the opposite. It destabilizes quietly, not by provoking, but by withholding. Withholding reaction, withholding explanation, withholding emotional feedback. This creates asymmetry, and asymmetry is where power accumulates. The hierarchy is built on this single principle. Who needs the situation to resolve first? The one who needs resolution sooner is always ranked lower, because urgency is submission. At the lowest levels, urgency is immediate. At higher levels, urgency disappears. Not because the outcome doesn't matter, but because the person has positioned themselves so outcomes are delayed in their favor. This is why intelligence is rarely loud. Loudness indicates dependence. Dependence on response. Dependence on acknowledgement. Dependence on validation. And dependence is the clearest indicator of rank. Another rule of the hierarchy: people don't rise by learning new behaviors. They rise by unlearning old ones. Unlearning the need to speak. Unlearning the need to clarify. Unlearning the need to appear intelligent. Every level above requires subtraction, less reaction, less visibility, less emotional footprint. This is why most people plateau. They keep adding skills, but never remove habits. They become sharper thinkers with the same emotional leaks, more articulate with the same impulse to defend, more aware with the same need to be seen. Awareness without restraint doesn't elevate rank. It just makes collapse more elaborate. And this is where the hierarchy becomes ruthless. Because higher levels don't forgive lower-level behaviors. One emotional outburst can erase months of silent positioning. One rushed explanation can undo long-term leverage. This is why intelligence must be consistent. You can't borrow it for moments. You either live at a level or you don't. And the hierarchy does not care about intention, only behavior. You may intend to be calm. You may intend to be strategic. You may intend to be patient. But under pressure, intention disappears. Only training remains, which is why the hierarchy feels unfair. Because it doesn't reward effort. It rewards conditioning. And now the most important rule of all. Movement within the hierarchy is mostly downward. People don't climb under pressure. They reveal where they already were. Stress doesn't create lower intelligence. It exposes it. That's why moments of disrespect are so diagnostic. Not because disrespect matters, but because reaction to it reveals rank instantly. This is also why the highest levels are rare. Not because they require genius, but because they require emotional disappearance. The ability to not be pulled, not by insult, not by misunderstanding, not by loss of status, to remain intact when nothing confirms you. Most people can't tolerate that, which is why the hierarchy narrows sharply at the top. And now that the structure is clear, now that you understand what defines movement, collapse, and restraint, the levels themselves can be examined, not as labels, but as mirrors. Because as each level is described, you won't need to decide where you stand. Your internal reaction will already tell you. Level 1 is not stupidity. That's the mistake most people make. Level 1 intelligence is reactive intelligence. It responds instantly. Emotion first, thought second. These are people whose internal state is controlled by the external world. A tone changes, they change. A comment lands, they react. A look feels dismissive, they adjust themselves to it. Their intelligence activates only after something happens, which means they are always late. At this level, behavior is driven by impulse, not strategy. Anger feels like strength. Expression feels like honesty. Immediate response feels like confidence. But from the outside, it's transparent, predictable. Level 1 intelligence cannot tolerate friction. Silence feels like loss. Disrespect feels personal. Ambiguity feels threatening. So they rush to close gaps. They explain themselves. They justify actions. They correct misunderstandings immediately, not because they are weak, but because they are untrained. They believe reacting restores control. In reality, it exposes it. The defining trait of level 1 is this: They need emotional equilibrium restored immediately. They cannot sit in imbalance, which makes them easy to steer. If someone wants a reaction, they know exactly how to get it. If someone wants information, pressure will extract it. If someone wants leverage, provocation provides it. Level 1 intelligence is visible everywhere. Online arguments, public confrontations, defensive explanations no one asked for. These people often believe they are expressive, authentic, passionate. What they really are is accessible. And accessibility under pressure is vulnerability. Level 2 is more sophisticated and more dangerous, especially to the person living there. Level 2 intelligence has knowledge. These people read, they analyze, they understand systems, patterns, psychology. They can articulate thoughts clearly. They often appear intelligent in conversation, but their intelligence collapses under ego threat. Level 2 intelligence is defined by one behavior: over-explanation. They don't react instantly like Level 1. They pause, they think, but they still feel the need to be understood. So they explain, they clarify motives, they provide context, they justify decisions, they correct narratives. They want the situation to reflect their internal logic, and that desire quietly destroys their leverage. Because explanation is not neutral. Explanation is a request for agreement, a request for validation, a request for alignment. And the moment you request alignment, you concede position. Level 2 intelligence believes clarity equals control. It doesn't. Clarity often benefits the listener more than the speaker, because the more you explain, the more predictable you become. Your values, your limits, your emotional thresholds, all exposed. Level 2 intelligence is often admired. People say things like, "He's smart. She explains things well." They really know their stuff. And yet, these people are constantly frustrated, because despite their intelligence, they are overlooked, disrespected, undermined. They can't understand why. The answer is simple. They reveal too much, too soon. They confuse being right with being positioned. They believe if others understood them better, outcomes would improve. They don't. Because outcomes are not decided by understanding. They are decided by leverage, and leverage requires asymmetry. Level 2 intelligence destroys asymmetry by filling silence. Where Level 1 reacts emotionally, Level 2 reacts intellectually. But both react, and reaction is the marker of lower rank. Here's the uncomfortable truth about Levels 1 and 2. They make up the majority. Most people live here their entire lives, not because they lack potential, but because these levels feel productive. Reaction feels like engagement. Explanation feels like mastery. But both are forms of leakage. Emotional leakage at Level 1, informational leakage at Level 2. And leakage always lowers position. Another defining trait of these levels: they personalize everything. Disagreement feels like disrespect. Silence feels like rejection. Delay feels like dismissal, so they try to fix the feeling instead of controlling the frame. And frame control is what separates higher levels from these. At Levels 1 and 2, intelligence is still self-centered. How do I feel right now? How do I appear? How am I being perceived? Higher levels move beyond this, but here the focus is internal, which makes these levels noisy. Not loud in volume, but loud in signal. Their reactions broadcast need to be seen, need to be acknowledged, need to be validated. And need is always read as weakness in power hierarchies, even when the person is competent, even when they are correct, even when they are valuable. This is why so many intelligent people remain powerless. They never move past these levels, because to move past Level 2 Something must be sacrificed, the need to be understood. Most people can't let go of that. They would rather explain themselves endlessly than sit silently and risk being misunderstood. And that choice defines rank. If any part of this feels uncomfortable, that's not accidental. Discomfort is diagnostic, because level 1 and level 2 behaviors are not obvious from the inside. They feel justified. They feel rational. They feel necessary. Only from the outside do they reveal what they truly are: immediate responses to pressure. And intelligence that responds instead of positioning never moves up the hierarchy. Level 3 is where people start believing they are different. Not superior, but separate. They no longer react instantly like level 1. They no longer explain compulsively like level 2. They pause. They observe. They recognize patterns. This alone makes them feel elevated. And in many environments, it does elevate them temporarily. Level 3 intelligence is pattern-aware. These people notice dynamics others miss. They read tone. They sense shifts in power. They understand timing better than most. They can predict reactions before they happen, which is precisely why this level is dangerous. Because prediction creates confidence, and confidence, at this stage, still leaks. Level 3 intelligence believes awareness equals immunity. It doesn't. They may see the trap, but they still step into it when ego is touched. Their reactions are delayed, not eliminated. They wait longer. They calculate more. But eventually, they act to confirm their self-image. They want their intelligence to be recognized, so they demonstrate it. Subtly, indirectly, but visibly. They correct someone, politely. They insert insight, casually. They reveal foresight, just enough to be noticed. This is the defining weakness of level 3. They still perform intelligence. They don't announce it loudly. They display it elegantly. And display is still exposure, which means leverage is still leaking. Level 3 people often become the smart one in the room, the advisor, the analyst, the observer who always seems one step ahead. But notice what happens over time. They are consulted, but rarely deferred to, respected, but not followed, listened to, but not feared. Because intelligence that seeks recognition can be acknowledged without being obeyed. Level 4 appears to fix this. Level 4 intelligence is strategic. These people think in sequences, not moments. They consider second and third order effects. They understand positioning. They don't rush. They don't overshare. They don't react impulsively. On the surface, this looks like high intelligence, and in many ways, it is. But Level 4 has a hidden flaw, a subtle one. Level 4 intelligence still depends on external alignment. They are strategic, but they still want the system to cooperate. They plan moves assuming rational responses. They calculate outcomes assuming fair interpretation. When the environment behaves as expected, they perform exceptionally. When it doesn't, tension begins. Because Level 4 intelligence still wants coherence. They want things to make sense. They want cause and effect to align visibly. And when outcomes become irrational, emotional, or chaotic, their composure weakens. Not dramatically, quietly. They start adjusting, explaining selectively, clarifying strategically, reframing narratives carefully. They don't collapse like lower levels, but they still engage. And engagement is the leak. The illusion at Level 4 is this: I am in control because I'm thinking ahead. But control doesn't come from thinking ahead. It comes from being unaffected when plans are disrupted. Level 4 intelligence still resists disorder. Higher levels use it. Another defining trait of Levels 3 and 4. They begin managing impressions intentionally. They curate how they are perceived. They adjust behavior based on audience. They maintain a consistent image. This feels like power, but it's still reactive, just slower, more refined, more socially acceptable. And because of that refinement, these levels trap people for years, sometimes for life. Because feedback at these levels is positive. People praise their insight. People trust their judgment. People rely on their competence. So there's no urgency to evolve until pressure hits from a direction they didn't anticipate. Public misinterpretation, silent undermining, unexplained exclusion. And that's when the crack appears. Because level 3 and 4 intelligence still cares about being placed correctly. They want their role to be understood, their contribution to be acknowledged, their position to be clear. When it isn't, discomfort returns. Not explosive, but corrosive. They start thinking about the situation more than controlling it, replaying conversations, adjusting tone, considering what to say next. Mental noise increases, and noise is the enemy of higher intelligence. At these levels, the person is no longer controlled by emotion, but by interpretation. What did that mean? How was that received? Did that change my position? The mind turns inward, which means attention leaves the environment. And when attention leaves the environment, positioning weakens. This is why levels 3 and 4 are the most deceptive. They feel like progress. They feel mature. They feel advanced. They feel close to mastery. But they still revolve around the self. How intelligent am I appearing? How well is my strategy working? How am I being read? True advancement begins only when these questions stop mattering. Because as long as intelligence is tied to self-image, it can be provoked. And anything that can be provoked can be controlled. Levels 3 and 4 are where most smart people live. Not the reactive, not the ignorant. The competent, the capable, the respected. Which is why leaving these levels is rare. To move beyond them, something uncomfortable must happen. You must let go of being seen as intelligent. Not ignored, not underestimated, misread. And that is the point where most people retreat, because misinterpretation feels like loss. Higher levels know it's leverage, and that shift from managing impressions to becoming indifferent to them is where the hierarchy breaks sharply. Because beyond this point, intelligence stops trying to look intelligent and starts becoming invisible. Level 5 is not an upgrade, it's a rupture. Everything that helped you survive levels 3 and 4 starts working against you here. Your awareness, your strategic thinking, your ability to read people, all of it becomes noise unless something fundamental changes. Level 5 begins where ego stops being useful, not suppressed, not managed, disconnected. This is the level where people stop asking, "How am I being perceived?" and start operating as if the question no longer matters. Not because they don't care, but because caring provides no leverage. Level 5 intelligence is defined by one capability: emotional detachment without disengagement. This is where most people misunderstand what's happening. They think detachment means coldness, apathy, withdrawal. It doesn't. Level 5 intelligence is fully present, but internally unreactive. Events happen, comments land, provocations occur, and nothing moves inside. Not because the person is numb, but because nothing has permission to. This is the breakpoint of the hierarchy. Below this level, intelligence is still personal, even when subtle, even when refined. Above this level, intelligence becomes positional. The individual stops being the center. The situation becomes the object. At level 5, silence changes meaning. It's no longer hesitation. It's no longer calculation. It's containment. The person does not fill space because space is doing the work for them. This is where restraint stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like default. Lower levels restrain themselves temporarily. Level 5 does not restrain. It simply does not react. And this distinction matters because effort leaks. If restraint feels like control, it won't last. At level 5, control is absence. Absence of urgency. Absence of internal dialogue. Absence of the need to restore balance. This is why level 5 intelligence is rare. Not because it requires brilliance, but because it requires the death of something familiar. The need to be right. The need to be seen. The need to correct. Most people cannot tolerate the vacuum that follows. When you stop explaining, you are misunderstood. When you stop reacting, you are misread. When you stop asserting, others project onto you. Level 5 accepts this completely, not as a tactic, but as reality. Projection becomes information. Misinterpretation becomes cover. And for the first time, the person stops leaking. At this level, intelligence is no longer demonstrated through speech. It's demonstrated through timing. When to act. When to remain absent. When to allow friction to build. Level 5 understands something lower levels never do. You don't need to win interactions to win positions. You don't need to dominate conversations to dominate outcomes. You don't need to be present constantly to be decisive. This is where long-term thinking becomes natural, not forced. The person is no longer optimizing for the moment. They are positioning across sequences, days, weeks, months, and because their emotional state is no longer attached to outcomes, they can afford patience, which gives them an advantage others can't fake. Another defining trait of level 5, they stop signaling intelligence altogether. No subtle displays, no indirect demonstrations, no controlled reveals. If intelligence is noticed, it's incidental. If it's ignored, it's irrelevant. This creates an imbalance in social dynamics. Others start overreaching. They talk more. They justify more. They explain more. They attempt to extract reaction. And every attempt fails, which quietly shifts the power dynamic, because the person who does not need confirmation cannot be destabilized. At level 5, people begin to realize something unsettling. Most conflicts are optional. Most provocations require consent. Most disrespect only lands if it's received, so they stop consenting. Not passively, selectively. This is also where the idea of self-control dissolves. Lower levels control themselves against impulse. Level 5 has no impulse to fight. The internal trigger is gone. And because of that, their external behavior becomes minimal, precise, sparse, unpredictable. Not because they are hiding, but because there's nothing left to prove. This is why level 5 often feels lonely. Not emotionally, structurally. Relationships change. People who relied on reaction feel unsettled. People who depended on explanation feel disconnected. People who needed reassurance feel exposed. But the trade-off is absolute clarity. At level 5, intelligence is no longer reactive or performative. It becomes infrastructural. The person shapes environments by what they do not reinforce. They starve drama. They starve urgency. They starve emotional escalation. And what remains is leverage. This is the point where most people stop climbing. Because beyond level 5, intelligence stops feeling human. It stops rewarding the ego. It stops confirming identity. It becomes quiet. And quiet feels like loss to those still attached to visibility. But those who cross this breakpoint understand. What feels like loss is actually freedom from manipulation. And freedom from manipulation is the foundation of the highest levels. Level 6 is no longer about intelligence. It's about presence, not in the physical sense, not in charisma, not in overt action. It's the kind of presence that shapes outcomes before a word is spoken. This is the realm of silent authority. At level 6, your mind is like a mirror, reflecting reality without distortion, observing without bias, predicting without interference. Most people at lower levels think intelligence is measured by answers. Level 6 understands. Intelligence is measured by what goes unanswered. You speak less, you act less, and yet influence grows. Because people are drawn to certainty in ambiguity. They seek it, even when unaware. Level 6 intelligence is uncontested because it is unassailable. This is where social dynamics reverse. People reveal their intentions naturally. Manipulations fail silently. Tensions collapse without confrontation. Notice the pattern. Earlier levels fight to be heard. Level 6 stops fighting. Level 6 becomes the observer that nobody can manipulate. Detachment deepens, but now it is active, not passive like level 5. You are engaged, but in a way that prevents your state from being penetrated. You influence by timing, subtle positioning, and silent calibration. Level 6 intelligence can orchestrate outcomes without being visible. This is what Machiavelli hinted at in his principle of indirect power. True authority is felt, not shown. At this stage, people underestimate you, and that underestimation is a tool. Lower levels attempt to assert dominance directly. Level 6 knows dominance is absorbed by others' overreach. You do nothing externally. You allow events to demonstrate your leverage. Others exhaust themselves trying to challenge you, and in doing so, they reveal more than you ever could demand. Another defining feature. Level 6 reads perception like a map. You do not guess, you predict. Who will overreact? Who will overcommit? Who will fold under pressure? And you position yourself in the folds of reality, always invisible yet influential. This level is rare. Few reach it, because it requires a complete renunciation of egoed interaction. No one can fake level 6. It's only visible in long sequences of behavior, in the absence of reaction, in the silent shaping of outcomes. At level 6, people try to draw you out. They provoke, they insult, they challenge, and it doesn't matter, because you do not need validation. You do not need control. You do not need to intervene. Your non-action is action. Lower levels misunderstand. Inactivity characterizes weakness. Level 6 knows. Inactivity falsifies leverage. The social tension you generate is exponential because everyone else is acting, reacting, explaining, and correcting. You remain outside the feedback loop. This creates a subtle, invisible force field. Requests bend toward you. Conflicts dissipate around you. Authority is assumed rather than demanded. Level 6 intelligence is surgical in invisibility. Every move or non-move is intentional. Every silence has weight. Every presence exerts gravitational pull. This is also where emotional neutrality becomes absolute. No joy, no anger, no anxiety dictates your interaction. Instead, you are a platform on which events unfold, not a participant in drama. At this level, influence becomes preemptive. You set conditions without appearing to do so. You create inevitabilities without confrontation. You shape perception without persuasion. The hallmark of level 6, you are untouchable, not because of force, but because of position. At this stage, most of the world appears predictable. Yet unpredictability is yours. Because while they move in chaos, you move in the invisible currents beneath it. Level 6 is rare mastery. It's where intelligence transcends strategy, where influence is felt before understood. where power is perceived before exercised. And the final shift is subtle. You stop managing outcomes consciously. You align with inevitable consequences, and because of this, you rarely fail. Level 6 is the art of being everywhere and nowhere at once. People sense it. They respect it. They follow it unknowingly. At this level, intelligence stops being a personal asset. It becomes a structural force. Level 7 is the summit. It's no longer about thinking, observing, or influencing. It's about shaping the environment itself so that outcomes naturally bend toward your objectives, without intervention. At this stage, intelligence is ambient. It is no longer confined to your mind. It extends into the structure of reality around you. Everything reacts to you, not because you command it, but because you exist at a frequency of inevitability. Lower levels chase knowledge. Level 1 reacts. Level 2 strategizes. Level 3 manipulates. Level 4 dominates. Level 5 observes silently. Level 6 orchestrates invisibly. Level 7 redefines the rules entirely. Here's what sets Level 7 apart. You predict every variable before it becomes noticeable. People's behaviors self-align with your presence. Conflicts resolve themselves in ways that favor you before you intervene. Influence is no longer exerted. It is absorbed by the system. At Level 7, outcomes feel inevitable to others. They never realize the intelligence guiding them because it is integrated into reality itself. This level is where strategy transcends action. Timing, words, gestures, obsolete. Influence, persuasion, manipulation, obsolete. Presence, authority, perception, obsolete. Why? Because Level 7 rewires the environment, and the environment acts in harmony with your intent. Think of it like a chessboard. At lower levels, you move pieces to control the game. Level 6 predicts all moves and waits for others to exhaust themselves. Level 7 changes the board itself. Moves, pieces, and rules adapt naturally. This requires absolute situational intelligence, a deep understanding of human behavior, probabilities, systems, and patterns, all simultaneously. Few even glimpse this level. Fewer understand it. Almost none can sustain it. Level 7 is unseen, unfelt, and unstoppable. Its influence is embedded in structural inevitability. People think they are acting freely, yet every decision aligns with your framework. The hallmarks of Level 7 intelligence. Environmental mastery. You manipulate structures, not people. Policies, social norms, routines, everything bends to your awareness. Predictive omnipresence. You anticipate every reaction. Nothing surprises you. Chaos collapses around you. Silent leverage action is optional. Your mere existence generates outcomes. Others expend energy, unaware they are in your orbit. Complete detachment. Emotions do not cloud judgment. Ego does not interfere. Decisions are structural, not personal. Invisible authority. Your power is felt, not recognized. Influence is so embedded in context that it appears natural. At this apex, you are the system itself. All previous levels are instruments. Level 7 is the instrument maker and the orchestra simultaneously. Those below will mistake this for luck, chaos, or coincidence. They will never understand the calculated inevitability operating behind the scenes. Level 7 intelligence does not seek acknowledgement. It does not chase results. It creates a reality where results occur automatically, where your goals manifest with minimal effort. Every action, silence, presence, and structure is part of an integrated strategy. Decisions are self-correcting. Challenges neutralize themselves. Authority requires no assertion. At this stage, you are untouchable, not through force, manipulation, or perception, but through structural inevitability. In essence, Level 1 to 6, You manage intelligence, influence, and perception. Level 7. Intelligence, influence, and perception manage reality itself. Few reach it. Fewer sustain it. Those who do are legendary, not because they are known, but because the world itself bends in quiet alignment with them. Level 7 intelligence is the ultimate Machiavellian ideal. It is power without assertion, influence without visibility, and mastery without recognition. To strive for it, begin with self-awareness. Level 1-2. Refine perception and strategy. Level 3-4. Master silent authority and environmental reading. Level 5-6. Then, aim to integrate all levels into a seamless orchestration of inevitability. Level 7. Only then will your intelligence transcend the ordinary. Only then will your presence redefine reality around you.